All right. Bhavani, video first. Voice, Bhavani.
MUST was established in collaboration with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, otherwise known as MIT. We also inherited MIT's world-class system and culture.
Our mission today is to provide students and working adults cutting-edge education and skills that are current and relevant to industry needs and ensures 100% employability.
In fact, QS World University rating granted us 5 stars for teaching and learning because of our world-class faculty, 5 stars for employability of our students, and number 1 in Asia for international students.
One of MUST's keys to success is our ongoing collaborations with our industry partners to make sure that our curriculum meets the industry standards present and future. We enable our students to have future internships and employment opportunities. We work with other universities from all around the world to ensure that our students have the best academic experiences.
We specialize in 3 areas: transport and logistics, business management, and information technology.
Our Transport and Logistics School is the front runner in Malaysia with faculty members who have rail industry experience. We are also the founding member of Asia Logistics and Supply Chain Council with prominent industry players sharing their best practices. That's why our students are offered employment even before they graduate.
In this day and age where the pace of digitalization is accelerating, we are continually developing innovative IT programs to meet the needs of industry and the IT world. As a mark of international recognition, the International Telecommunication Union has designated MUST a centre of expertise in the Internet of Things and IP version 6. In addition, MUST is a founding member of the Smart Industry Association Malaysia and has formed partnerships with multinational manufacturers such as Bosch and Daikin.
The business management faculty at MUST is led by industry experts, and this has allowed us to get membership with AACSB, which is the worldwide recognition for business schools around the world. Our MBA program is currently offered in many global centers such as China, India, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, as well as Myanmar.
Okay, Bhavani, move on. Dr. Kari, next agenda, please.
Hey.
Hello.
Yes. Bhavani, you having problem with the video?
The MBA program, we are business ready for employability in practically any sector at all. We were already having online sessions with our MBA candidates even in 2019, before the onset of COVID-19 pandemic. This is very important. Why? Because it allows us to combine groups of students from a transnational grouping, so that international exchange of ideas is something really incredible.
MUST is the leading Malaysian university of choice when it comes to PhD programs. We currently have more than 200 active students in our program. We have an outstanding track record in PhD supervision and guiding our students in publishing their research work in emerging fields such as Industry 4.0, digitalization, supply chain management, AI, and more. MUST's world-class faculty and researchers, along with our international recognitions such as AACSB membership, CMI UK, QS World University Ratings and eQuiz make us a highly sought-after school for postgraduate education.
Here at MUST, we have Students Experience and Affairs Department, also known as SEED.
Our Student Experience and Affairs Department takes steps to ensure our personal growth through programs that can help develop our communication and leadership skills, as well as teamwork.
We strive for our students to not only have the best academic experience, but also the best on-campus lifestyle experiences. We have weekly ongoing activities as well as different clubs and societies such as the Lunchtime Club, Bowling Club, Esports Society, and so much more.
As a MUST student, one of the perks we have is learning from Infinity Academy, which is one of the best performing arts training center in Malaysia. You would think that when you're going into technical courses that people are just focusing on IT and transport and communication, things like that. But when we go into performing arts, I saw most of my classmates breaking out of their shell. And it also is a benefit because I gained 10 academic credits.
A MUST student is someone with high integrity, commitment, great attitude and good values. I'm glad I've chosen this university as my stepping stone. 100% employability is what MUST aims for all students. I'm confident that I'll have a bright future.
So come and join us at MUST.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Allow me to share my slide, Bhavani. Ms. Bhavani? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, doctor. Done.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Professor Prem Kumar Rajagopal, President of Malaysia University of Science and Technology. I hope our distinguished keynote speaker for this morning is here, Professor Mark Goh, who comes all the way from Singapore. Thank you for gracing our colloquium this morning. And we also have our distinguished keynote speaker for tomorrow, and he has joined us this morning also, Encik Azman Hassan. Thank you very much for joining. Our audience, our academic and industry partners, local and international, our PhD students, local and global, and last but not least, our MUST staff. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the exciting PhD colloquium sessions. This morning and tomorrow morning, we will have this key speeches for
Ms. Bhavani, Dr. Carey?
Yes, Dr. B, I'm here.
Okay, can I just take over, just immediately just say that I'll now give my welcoming note. Yeah, please.
Okay, sure, doctor. As the next section, we will have our President of the MUST University, Prof. Dr. Prem Kumar Rajagopal, for his opening speech.
Hi, and very good morning to all of you. Hope you all can hear me. Bhavani, can all of them hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, all right. Loud and clear. Excellent, great. Yeah, a good morning to all of you. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. And we are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you who have been with us for a long time, 3 years, 4 years, as PhD students, as well as those who are new to the PhD Colloquium. Yep. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Mars PhD Q2 Colloquium 2021. We are very grateful to the IPS team for their tremendous support that they have provided in hosting this colloquium, particularly Dr. Kyrie, the Dean of IPS, Institute of Postgraduate Studies, Ms. Bhavani, Ms. Nurusha, the 2 RAs who have put their resources together and engaging this event. I would like to refer to also many initiatives that has taken place in IPS despite the COVID-19 challenges. The RM Research Methodology Workshop, Advanced Research Methodology Workshop, academic paper writings, and many more to come. Now, please allow me to now just take you through a little bit of slides to share with you on some of our achievements of MEST. Are you all able to see my slide?
Yes.
All right, great. First of all, let us come to a common understanding of what is the purpose of the colloquium. Basically, the primary objective of the colloquium is meant to deal with the current cutting-edge concerns, with the respective field or discipline of study through preparatory studies, preparing students, followed by debates and meetings with academia, industry players to unfold the latest development in your own discipline area. Let it be management, let it be transport, let it be logistics, supply chain, IT, engineering, and so on. So the specific objective would be to bring together subject-specific networking skills. We will have people from industry, we have people who have advanced in their research in the PhD pathway. So it's a networking session. Number 2, writing for publication. This is the avenue also where we will have distinguished speakers coming in, as well as senior professors who will be sitting down the round table discussion. So they will also be sharing about the writing publications. Third, the fostering and development of connections. Here we also plan to have good connections with the industry, and also with the PhD students. You all are working adults. 80% of our PhD students are working adults. So here we are able to build the connection between various industry sectors, and also to bring about concepts and ideas, especially during this time of challenging period of COVID-19. Many things just unfold. And I don't know whether do we still call it new norm. It's no more new norm. It's a norm. Working from home is a norm already. Which is part of the culture already. Learning from peer, the strategy how to successfully have a winning PhD. And also finally, applied research. We are also looking for potential applied research, industry-based research that are driven to solve industry problems. So these are the objectives of colloquiums. Now, what is our commitment, commitment to you, our promise to you, that we want every student to have full confidence in Mars University. Our student satisfaction is a fundamental to the university's long-term success in providing solution for students. The commitment to quality by every team member at every level within our university will drive the quality objectives defined by the Mars University. So, where do you focus? Continuous improvement. As you can see, despite the challenge of this COVID-19, we never fail to keep our colloquium, our promise to go, on the colloquium. We still want to go with the colloquium. So this is the Q2 colloquium for 2021. Second, empowering stakeholders. We share the responsibility and also to a certain degree the accountability to our students, to participate and organize this colloquium. Bring the minds, great minds together. Performance standard. We continue to strive for quality assurance. and not only to just meet the standards of the Malaysian Qualification Agency, but also to go for international recognition and accreditation. The fourth one is integrity. Whatever we do, we hold on to integrity. Yeah, we speak what we walk. Yeah. And finally, offer great programs to the market and specifically to our students studying in MUST. What have we achieved? The greatest news is our EQUIS achievement. I just received the letter from EQUIS, 1st of July, that Malaysia University of Science and Technology is now a full member of EQUIS. In Malaysia, there are only 8 universities who are EQUIS members, and now we are EQUIS member. EQUIS is the gold standard for School of Business and Logistics. So now we are there achieving this, yeah? And hopefully another 3 to 4 years down the road, we will go for the EQUIS accreditation, where in the world there are only about 120 over universities which have obtained EQUIS accreditation in the world. And of course, our distinguished speaker, Professor Mark Gore, coming from NUS. NUS is an EQUIS. In Malaysia, we don't have even a single university with EQUIS accreditation, but MUST University, Malaysia University of Science and Technology, will go for EQUIS accreditation in 3 to 4 years. That's our promise to you. We will go for it. Yeah? Next, in the QS rating, we are given 5-star for teaching and employability. And also, I'm glad to announce that we were recognized as #1 in Asia for international student category by QS in 2021. That's a great achievement for Malaysia University. And also we have the AACSB accreditation, which comes from the US for a business school. And many more. We are a member of ITU in terms of expertise for Industry 4.0, IoT, and IPv6. CMI has mapped our MBA and agreed to offer a double degree level 7, ASIC accreditation, and the very recent one is the Cage Business School, a triple crown university in the world, which has agreed to offer their Euro-Asia MBA in Malaysia for the first time, and they'll be launching the program somewhere in September this year. Not far, just another 2 to 3 months to go. Yep. So this is what we have achieved so far. Yep. And I would sincerely urge that all of you be well connected with our university, Malaysia University of Science and Technology, and enjoy what we have got to offer you in the university. Yeah. And I'm very glad that we found a selection of distinguished speakers for this colloquium Q2 21 to speak about their lessons learned over the years, and also to look ahead for the roundtable discussion which is going to happen, yeah, in the colloquium session. And I wish to note that we have something special for you in store later today. Yeah. Before coming close to this remark, I would also like to remind you, and especially our organizer and moderator, to strictly stick to our time schedule and not to have any session overrun. Yep. I sincerely hope you will enjoy today and the next day for the debate and networking of Colloquium, PhD Colloquium, Q2 2021. Thank you for your participation and looking forward for your active engagement in this colloquium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Prem. Yeah, clap, 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 clap.
Let's pat the back. Let's pat the back. Yeah.
I want to show that. Can you show the slide? Yes, let's now welcome Professor Dr. Mark Goh, our first keynote speech with the title, The World of Big Data and Recommender Systems. Please welcome Professor Dr. Mark Goh.
Guys, Good morning. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for the rousing morning speech by Prem and his colleagues. Okay, indeed, good to see that MAS has progressed very, very far and very fast too, right? And congratulations for securing all the accolades, particularly Equis, and may it be the first of many steps in your wonderful journey, right? And for today, let me just cut to the chase. I only have a few minutes, I was told. Now that the moderator is going to keep a strict time watch. First things first, housekeeping. Are you able to see me?
Can you please unshare the slide?
Okay. If you are able to see me now, I will just move out to share the slide contents. Right. Okay. Let's see whether we can see the slides. Okay. Hey, what happened now? Okay. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I will then start. I'm going to give you two today, just as a special bonus because this is July, nothing to do with anything else. Okay, the first one is okay. Sorry, let me put it back to front. The second one is what Dr. Carol mentioned just now about big data and recommender systems. So that's where I'll show you some of the work that I've been currently doing for the last few months. Then after that. Before that, rather, the first part is actually where we talk about, something relevant to your students, relevant to your school, which is on logistics and supply chain, right? So that will not chase your students away, both current and potential, okay? Now, so my first part is actually about some of the trends that I see and maybe some of the opportunities that you should be able to think about for your research. So the trends will be recent trends in supply chains and the opportunities for research. So this is the slide that you should see before you, right? So all good. Okay, if all good, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, good, excellent. Okay. Yeah, I just need two people in this whole talk, One is the timekeeper, the other one is the indicator keeper, so that I know that I'm still talking to you and not to myself. Okay, it does happen. Now, next. So in terms of logistics, the space of logistics, as you will see, well, COVID-19 is interesting because one, it stopped a lot of activities and questioned a lot of the processes of logistics and the operations in logistics, right? But the good news is that because it stopped, it's affected many a supply chain, in particular the global supply chain, and many industry, in particular electronics, automotives, and even pharmaceutical, as you know, right? The vaccine supply chain is a very classic study of a supply chain in disarray in a sense, right? And more recently, about 48 hours ago, we hear of another supply chain being affected, which is the oxygen supply chain for Indonesia, right? And by the way, the oxygen supply chain for Indonesia is not new because about 2.5 months ago in India, there was a similar oxygen supply chain issue. So maybe we have not done enough work. Maybe industry is not aware of some of these challenges because we always think that oxygen is a given, right? And for research, then the question is, well, what can research do to support some of these things? All right, so that's where for this morning, I want to show you, this is not my slide, it came from a company that has sort of mapped up all the logistics parcels or the silos that they've been operating, and they think that other companies have been operating in. Now, and if you look at the one on the left-hand side of the screen, right, in blue, where you see things like supply chain logistics, inbound logistics, warehouse management, intra-logistics, line feed, right, outbound logistics, and logistics routing. Now, any student in logistics will recognize this as very important critical components of the logistics suite of activities. Any company who is a 3PL or a 4PL will also see this as bread and butter of their activities. And any shipper will see themselves being involved in either one or at least one or some of these key sets of activities or key pillars of activities. And of course, from the research perspective, we all know, some of you are very familiar, you've gone through your courses, you've studied and you've done your own research on this, and you see tons of papers written under the broad heading, say, for example, warehousing, and the broad heading, say, inbound logistics or materials management, if you're working in industry, and those of you who have dealt with SAP would know these things, right? Or even more familiar things that we have heard in the last 20 years or 30 years, where we talk about vendor managed inventory. Very, very, very sexy topic in the 1980s and 90s. And today, of course, it's a given, and people practice VMI to a T, right? But in terms of other areas that we have seen in the future, say about 2-3 years ago, there'll be things like warehouse management system, digital twins in a warehouse, where a colleague of mine in NUS is doing some work on that, right, where we talk about now the automatic or the automated warehouse management system, right? So the question then is, right, what else is there to be done, right? That's the first question. Okay, now let's move on to that part. So this basically, if you look at this talk, what am I getting to? I'm getting you into an understanding of some of the key trends, right, that will affect our landscape here in this part of the world, right, for the next 5 years. 2, I'll present some 5 trends, and then after that, we'll try and map it across some research opportunities for you guys to think about. Then 3, we'll look at also how, like what Professor Prem mentioned about all this connecting to network and all that, right? Then we'll think about how do we get you to think about and connect with industry, with yourselves, to provide what we call cutting-edge industry relevant research, right? That's the applied side of it. How do we bring the research you've done in the lab to the benchtop, in an office setting or a factory setting or a 3PL setting, right? And then the next one, of course, is more importantly, not so much the new normal, but to recognize that COVID is going to be once in our lifetime that we have a chance to experience it, for better or for worse, right? And so the question then is, how do we bring the whole concept, the whole understanding, the whole study of the supply chain management logistics to the next level of maturity and development, ready for the post-COVID-19 era? So with that, let me move on. So just now we saw, and I promised I'll show you some recent trends. So I'm going to show you 5 trends. I will see down here, my 4th slide, just below the bar 4, right? I put down there 5 key trends shaping the supply chain. The first one I think is very obvious: innovations in business. The very fact that we're here today communicating in this way is an innovation, right? Of course, for those of you who have bought Zoom, right, then you'll be very happy because you'd have made your money many times over. But little do we know, 3 years ago, right, that we should have bought Zoom. Nobody knows, right? And in fact, 3 years ago, the company Zoom was not even known. Okay, so that's where we see a lot of innovation happening in the last 12 to 18 months alone, right? Be it in the space of technology, be it in the space of e-commerce, be it in the space of digital supply chains, for example. But the other part, which is another important recognition, and that is that there's this thing called the shorter and tougher business cycles. We all recognize this. And today, many governments are actually, pulling out their reserves, right, to actually feed one important part of the economy. And the important part of the economy are the SMEs. They are suffering, they're feeling the pain, practically every country. So of course, then you might ask, so what's that going to do with the supply chain? Well, obviously, supply chain services business. As your business cycles get tougher and shorter, then you find that there must be more what we call urgency on the supply chain to be performing 2 parts of a function. One is agility, the other one is resilience, right? So that's the question there. And that's why today there's a whole resurgence of research, for example, into this thing called agility and into this thing called resilient supply chain. So in short, what we are saying is that we're not talking about the popular fetish concept of the 80s and 90s, where we talk about legality, whereby it is lean and agile. But today we're talking about agile resilience, which means the supply chain must learn to be agile to support business, and the supply chain must go beyond understanding of risk, but to be robust, to be resilient against some of these externalities that are happening, for example, COVID-19. Right? The other part, of course, is expanding and demanding consumer base, the third trend, and that's true. Because of COVID.
Sorry, your slides, is this supposed to be moving? Now we are on page 4.
No, you're on page 4, yes, correct. You see it?
Right, yes.
Yes,
okay.
yes. I'm just speaking through the slides, okay? So if you find that I've moved faster than the slide, let me know. If you find that the slide has not moved, do let me know.
Okay, sure, thanks.
Okay, so where was I? Yes, consumer base, okay? So that's where, I'm sure you recognize that because of COVID-19, right, one of the things that many companies have found out, and some more than others, some more painful, some more benefiting than others. For example, stage of e-commerce, right? B2C, C2C, and so on. Right, today there are many more e-commerce players, and of course with that, right, you find that there are, of course, some downside effects, and downstream effects would be the malls have suffered, the food courts, the food restaurants, the hospitality sector, they all suffered, right? So here, then the question is, how do we look at research to support some of these things in the context of certain supply chains, right? And I'll come to that later. Point number 4, unfortunately, cost has gone up because of wages. And you find that practically every country in Asia today is talking about this thing called minimum wages. And this concept of minimum wages is something that, which in the 80s and 90s forced many companies to come to Asia because Asia was still relatively cheap in terms of one of these factors of production, that is labor, manpower, right? But today you find that it's different now because wages have gone up, and that's why, you know, the bottom of the pyramid, which salary workers are pressing for all these minimum wages. And we all know that minimum wages is both good and bad. It helps one part of society, but it affects the other parts, which is the cost of doing business, right? And that's where, you know, the supply chain must come to grips with that, and that's where business must come to grips with that, and that's where research has not entertained enough of that. Right, point number 5, and that's something that I will touch on in the second part of my slide again, and that is the evolution of big data. It's become a very popular word, data, and not just data, but people think that data must be big. The bigger, the better. Well, my question then is, okay, yes, I think we're starting to realize, companies are starting to realize, scientists are starting to realize, researchers are starting to realize that data can tell a lot of things. First, it can inform. Second, it can direct. Third, it can actually help us to activate what we need to activate for action, right? Right, so that's where it is. And the question then, of course, is, you know, from the research perspective, what is big data? How big should big be before it can qualify for big data? And I'll tell you this, most people have never answered that question, right? So there is one potential research question, right? So in each of these 5, right, that's where I've provided here in the slide to show you very quickly some of the things that are happening. For example, in slide, in first trend, right, innovations in business, right? And that's where you will see and you recognize this. And in fact, the other day I was just talking to another university in Malaysia, where I happen to be an external examiner, right? And they are also saying these things, and they say that, look, right, their students need to learn how to merge, how to handle supply chain management with their IT systems, because they are newer and smarter IT systems, particularly those that are cloud-based. Not so much the heavy, clunky legacy systems, but those which are cloud-based that are now more nimble and smarter. And of course, with that, there's a lot of security issues, right? So there's 2 areas of research. One is, right, the interface between technology and supply chain. The other one is, of course, you know, all those cloud-based technologies that we come in, the technology part of the supply chain, which is been relatively understudied in many universities. Right, so in terms of innovation, as I have listed down here, as I try my best to list down here, ranging from mobile internet, which we are now very conversant with, autonomous vehicles, which you will see even more in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on your stage of country maturity, or the automation of work. That means basically freeing up low-level, low-value added workers to do other things. 3D printing, already a norm, and today we're seeing how to embed 3D printing into the supply chain to actually lower the cost of shipment. Right, Internet of Things, as you know, low-cost sensors and so on, and for the more developed countries like Australia, Singapore, we've seen the practice of this thing called low-cost sensors and actuators for data collection. Good example, for example, in Singapore, we have a technology called Trace Together. Likewise, in Australia, so they have a QR code technology-driven Trace Together, and that's where we monitor human movement. And so today's thinking is this: they can use the same Trace Together now to monitor cargo movement, right? And that's all in the name of process optimization. Lighter materials, of course, it's always been in research, material science, and that's where it pinches to robotics. And in my next part, I'll show you what I mean by lighter materials and cost of using some of these flexible, supple arms to move and carry things on behalf of people, right? And that's where we use all these new advanced materials. And even for that matter, companies like Unilever, which I'm also doing a project with now, in fact, this is my second project with them, right? They're also looking at some of these advanced materials for their packaging, right? In terms of their plastic packaging and so on, how to get their plastic packaging to be more environmentally friendly, more breathable, right? Cloud technology, we all know that too well. Most of you will be better experts at it than I, right? And the next one, of course, is the advanced robotics. Smarter robots, intelligent robots, AI-driven robots who can think on the fly and be able to react and respond accordingly. And if you don't like words, then what I've done is I've given you a set of schematic pictures that is on the other side of the slide here. You see all these things, right? First one, the automated vehicle, automated cargo delivery, shape of a car with some cartons in there, and even parking space optimization, right? And it's supposed to help the truck drivers to find their best loading dock, so to speak. So all these are fast becoming a reality in our space. Okay, but let's hold it there and then say, okay, how does it speak to research? Think about it. Right, well, I move on to the next slide. So in the next slide, which is the second trend, this big word, VUCA. I'm surprised that, this is not a new word. It's an old word, right? It first came out, I think, was in 1987, right, by these two professors, Renis and Nanus, who described the uncertain environment that we are working in. Imagine that, 1980, they talked about it. Okay, to be fair, the late 80s. Right, we're still talking about it. So what does it mean? It basically says that at the end of the day, we've not gotten a good grasp of the issue. And that's where perhaps as industry faces a problem, research might come in and say, how can we support industry, right, to solve that problem? And what's that problem? The problem of volatility in the marketing or the business landscape, uncertainty, right, in many of the things that we've planned for, complexity in how we are in terms of the market, and the ambiguity of the external environment. It changes, it's very fluid. And COVID-19 has shown us that it is possible to be very fluid. In fact, if anything, COVID-19 has brought us to that fine point of fluidity that sometimes we don't even know how to react. And that's why you see many government are switching, thinning in their heads and not having a firm hold of policy. The next one, of course, is customization. So this thing of mass customization has never died. It's still ongoing. The question then is on what platform and at what level, right? So that's the question for research. Volatility in price. Okay, the classic thing here is very simple. You look at shipping. We all talk about shipping, being important to Malaysia, to Singapore, and to our part of the world because we've got a big mass of water connecting all the lands that we live on. But do we know that because of this recent event called COVID-19, shipping rates have gone up, right? No more less than $1,000 US per container to now we are looking at, for example, the Trans-Pacific route, right? $7,000 to $9,000 a container box. So what does that mean? It basically says that, look, your cost of transportation will go up, and because of the volatility, right, many players are suffering, right? They cannot predict how much the cost will go up, and at the end of the day, the cost will have to be passed through to someone. Whether it's a customer or absorbed by the shipper or absorbed by the 3PL, that's the question that we have to look at it. So it becomes an agency issue down here. Insolvency, supply insolvency, we saw that already. And all this now are happening, right? Especially for the SMEs. Now, the good news is this. We are seeing change faster. So that means to say that whatever we think we preach in the classroom, we can now test it out in reality. But the bad news is this. Economic cycles in the past, if you understand contractive along with theory, then it says that, look, economic cycles will happen once in every 10 to 15 years. But today we see it happening much faster, once in every 5 years. So whatever you want to test on the field from a research perspective or by researchers, you will see this, that it will be tested faster. So the question, how do we do it? Take the example of the automotive industry. It's a simple example, right? Because of the simple, humble chip, right? And no offense to companies like UMC, TSMC, you'll find that everybody is saying that, look, the auto industry will take at least 12 to 18 months to recover to their pre-crisis level. And we're talking about at this point of presenting this slide, right? So what that means is that, look, if you want to buy your cars, you should have bought it much earlier, about 6 months ago, where the price of a car was cheaper. And not just the price of a car, but the price of a used car was cheaper. Don't believe me? Look at some of the latest shows that came out from the US, and they're already experiencing that in many of the US cities. Point number 3, customer, right? And this is something that's very, very interesting. And I can only give you details, as you can see in this slide, of 2 countries, China and India. And this thing called no more urban, no more rural. In fact, there's now a interface, a hazy line between urban and rural. And that's what we call the Ruben population, 3.5 billion people globally. So what does that mean? It means that, look, at the end of the day, when we talk about the supply chain being affected by COVID, industry being affected by COVID and so on, but the reality is that people are still people. We still want to be kept up to date on many things, one of which is fashion. The other one is having to spot international brands, right? And so that's where we see this Ruben population calling the shots, right, in some of these fast developing countries like India and China, right? And in fact, for China, you find that, look, they are realizing that the big malls in China, you talk to the mall players, they'll say this, okay, the landlords are suffering, but the big retail demand, right, actually are coming from the smaller cities, right? That means the tier 3, tier 4, which is about 13 to 150,000 people, right? Okay, so that's the start, right? Small cities where the demand is coming. So the question then is, how do we shape the logistics in the light of current COVID environment? Right now, in point number 3 in particular, you find that a lot of this is not just due to COVID, to be fair, right? A lot of this is due to the internet, it's due to online people, like people, not the Generation Z people, but even younger, the millennials and so on, where we talk about they influencing, or what we call the key opinion leaders, KOLs, right? They are influencing a lot of people to buy things. That's why when you see TikTok, you watch some of these things on social media, it's critical because it'll tell you the next wave. And that's where sometimes industry, at least the more traditional industries, have been slow in getting their feet and act together. And that's where the supply chain has been slow in responding also. Okay, so what is the bottom line? The bottom line is recognized that the game of retail has been transformed in technology and the digital space. Now, let me move on to the next one. Converging wages. If we dive a bit more, then you see 3 things here. One is this move towards low-cost destinations is still there, right? So in 1986, when McKinney and Berg, the 2 professors from Harvard Business School, talk about, offshoring and so on, right? That basically, this is still true, right? That India, China, Vietnam in particular will be the hotspots for manufacturing. And today we already see in Vietnam, they are the source of many supply chain in commodities and also in industrials. And that's why companies like Samsung, Honda, they are there. And India, there's no need to say, because it's not just big, but also it's a potential for a new manufacturing hub for the world, at least for this part of the world. And that's why in Singapore, we were very keen to sign up SICA with India, because we see that as a potential. Okay, so that's what it is. But of course, then you may argue here and say, hey, what about all the research that was done on China the last 10 years? Where is China now? And what's the talk about China being the manufacturing hub of the world? Well, the reality is this. The wage advantage of China, as you see in point number 1 on this slide, right? The wage advantage of China has been reducing. And again, due to 2 things. One is cost of living has gone up. 2 is minimum wage policy. That's why, for example, the cheapest place to produce, or the factory in China, say Anhui, which is just below Shanghai, right? They have actually gone up, from US $80 to $166, double it literally because of the economic development of China. And if you compare Anhui to Shanghai, Shanghai's minimum wage is about $358 USD per month, right? So what does that say? It says that, look, over time, in the next 3 to 5 years, you will see China so-called losing its crown of being the factory of the world, but it will still be the so-called consumer of the world. Okay, point number 5, big data that I talk about. And I want to highlight a bit more about this because I think here there's been a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of practice by companies, a lot of interest by companies in the last 24 months, despite COVID, okay, to try and harness that data. So basically what we are saying is that now today we're looking at data, not as in going through a system serially, but people being able to get data almost instantaneously on a platform throughout a system. And because of this, that's why there's a big research called blockchain that comes into play, right? To make sure that data that's transmitted to everybody at the same time is secure and not hacked. But of course, we all know, right? Unfortunately, the cyber hackers are very smart. They're even faster as we move, right? So today, data is increasingly being hacked and stolen, both personal and commercial. So the question then is, okay, what is it for the supply chain when it comes to big data? The key question here I will pose to you is this, that supply chain managers, I think, all want to make use of the data to exploit. Why? Because they want to make good business decisions based on real-time data. So this is the time where we talk about data being in real time, the so-called the holy grail of the supply chain, right? And just in real time, not just for themselves and their customers or for themselves and their suppliers, but in real time across the entire supply chain. And this, if it's done properly with big data, I believe it can give rise to the new wave, the new level of supply chain called the digital supply chain. But the issue, of course, is, and the research here calls for that, and is how to establish trust. And that's why I gave you a newspaper clipping down there, the initiative for trust sharing of data by supply chain players. And you'll find that if you worked in the industry, you know, right, in this industry, right, everybody is happy to share let you see the cargo volume, but no one will share, for example, their price data, their cost data. Okay, even the 3PLs in the e-commerce space like Ninja Van, very popular in our part of the world, right? They're already rolling out AI-driven chat for shippers. Now, to be fair, well, this one here was actually published about a year ago, September 17, 2020. The truth of the matter is this: Ninja Van is still struggling with this issue, and that is how do we bring all the shippers, right, onto the Ninja Chat platform? What are these shippers? They're not just the company shippers. It can also be the small SME shippers. It can also be the individual shippers. So that's the challenge for them. So now they are still asking the same question, and they're approaching some of the universities, particularly in US, to see how we can help them to look at a suitable go-to-market strategy for their Ninja Chat. Okay, let me move on from there. So once you bring all this together and say, okay, where's the research? Where's the whole story coming to, right? And that's where the answer will be given in this slide, and that is that the research starts with players in industry, as you can see in the schematic at the bottom, to the transformation that's taking place in industry called the industry digital transformation, over to what is really happening in terms of some of the things that are driving, or some of the technological developments that are driving this transformation. For example, the devices that we have, the things that we see in the air, the drones, the things that we see, the new things that we see on the ground, the AGVs, the things that we see to make sure that we recognize people faster and more accurately, video surveillance, for example, and others like sensors to even spot you before you reach the point and touch anything, right? And the next part, of course, is the robotics part, the industry automation, right? How does it all work, right? And so in a sense, if you think about this, right, COVID-19 is a good test bed for some of the things that we want to implement, right? And at the same time, now it's not so much focusing all the data, not all the information, all the nerve center into one place, but it's becoming what we call distributed. And that's where the last portion of this slide says that, look, the enterprise IT person, if you are working in technology in supply chain, I'll tell you this, your demand has grown up by fourfold. If you can do enterprise IT in the setup that I've shown you down there, and that is that using a 5G network, right? Creating a logical 5G network. That is massive demand for you guys. And I tell you this, right, as a quick indicator how good the demand is. There's one school in where I currently work, where I call in US. It's a school of computing. Guess what? Computing in the last 10 to 15 years. Not that big, you know. Okay, stable, right? They probably have about 600 or so undergraduates each year. But in the last 24 months, the number of undergraduate enrollment in computer science has gone up to 2,400 students, undergraduate. So what does it say? It says that basically people recognize demand. But the question is, how do we get our act together? So that's where we pose to you this research trends. The first one is increasingly we see merging of technology in the supply chain. So how do we then understand how do we exploit robotics, product IT, QR code technology? No more barcode, okay? No more all this, daisy wheel printer, no, everything is just done by QR code technology. How do we use smart technology in the warehouses, the drones, the robots, right, for faster pick and pack, more accurate even, right? 5G we talked about already. How do we minimize the latency? It means how do we bring the big evil in the supply chain called the lead time? How do we bring it down to zero so that whenever the customer wants, we can give, and more important, even better, before even the customer wants, we give it to them and tell them this is what's new, ask them whether they receive. And today it's happening already. So supply chain as a service, I think today many companies see this as important, but the question is research is still slow in the sense that we don't understand how to put supply chain as a service into our research agenda. So McKinsey very nicely late last year put up this thing called the next generation supply chain, where they actually showed, right, how supply chain service providers does not just do physical delivery, but they also do the financial delivery, right, payment and so on. And that's where they bring in the blockchain activity into play, right? So that is where we talk about, the service part, the finance part. And in some aspects, in the retail sector, this is the last third bullet of this point number 3 here, where you see in retail, there's this thing called smart shelving. Smart shelving is very much similar to procurement side. We talk about smart contracting, but smart shelving say whenever a thing is taken off, replenishment is done almost instantaneously, right? And they know how to shift and do a dynamic so-called shelf allocation, so that customers can actually buy more of what they want and less of and buy less of what they don't want, right? And better still, customers can see what is in the shop before they even go in, right? So that's where the smart part is. Point number 4, which is the higher level research, and there's the need for that by you. The higher level research is the policy research related to the supply chain, right? And today we see the ASEAN Economic Community, I mean, sad to say, it's still a bit slow, but we're getting there somehow, right? Then the more important one is the bigger picture, the RECP, the Regional Economic Cooperation Partnership, right? Which is now being ratified by many countries in this APEC, right? And this is where we'll connect the physical and the digital, right? So this becomes a reality, but because it's policy, policy must be backed up by reality, right? And the reality is that the supply chain must go in sync with what policy is doing. So the question is, then how do we study whether policy is workable, whether policy is effective, whether policy should be done in a certain way, right? So that's a big research question down there. So in conclusion for this part of the slide, I would think that, look, I mean, if we talk about the new wave, the next wave for the supply chain, then I would think that there are 4 components to consider, the ABCDs, right? There's a lot more opportunity for study in AI. There's definitely work to be done on blockchain, right? And C, cloud, right? Looking at cloud computing, how to mesh it better. And as you go up, if you don't want to continue an academic career, I'm sure if you are a good supply chain graduate, you should be able, and you are well equipped with technological skills, then you should be able to handle cloud computing in a business industry setting. And the last one, of course, is the D, which I'll come to in the next part. Data. What is it so important about data? How do we use data and exploit it in the supply chain to remove excesses? But if you look at the ABCD, then at the end of the day, it's all about the VUCA environment again, whereby you try to manage things like vulnerability, complexity, right? And of course, I changed the A with E, and that is to manage efficiency, to keep the supply chain as efficient as possible. So if this is the case, then where's the new research taking us? So this is where I'll share with you the same slide that I showed earlier on, but now I will remove the red part and show you what the other areas of research that can come into play that you might want to think about, right? For example, we talked about earlier on, right? Some of the cloud things, some of the technology part, and you see that the new research, which is the one that's boxed in red here, like this and like this, okay? And I actually broke it up into 2 rates, okay, to be fair. The first part, the rate, I think this one, most people have done it already, right? Active delivery management and so on. And then the other part, which is the predictive delivery and all this predictive inbound and so on, you find that they all depend on AI, depend on machine learning and data. And so that brings me to the next part of the research that I want to share with you for today. Let me just move on from there, if you allow me. Okay, let me see. So I will close this now, and I will. Okay. Okay. Can you see this? Can you see this? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Let me go on with this, okay, in the interest of time. And do let me know if I've overstepped my time. I don't wish to overstep my time. So this is what I promised Dr. Kyra earlier on, that I'll talk about this thing called the big data and recommender systems. But if you look at my title, I put it in a very unique way. The world of big data. And my world is spelled with a small w. But big data is spelled with big. Why? Because I think the emphasis for us in the supply chain context for research should be big data and how to use, exploit, harness big data through machine learning, artificial intelligence to create what we call recommender systems, which I mentioned to you just now already, that we want to preempt customer demand by telling them or to recommend to them or to prescribe to them, right, what they should be doing. So this is where we talk about the next wave, where logistics service providers or 3PLs are coming in to say, let's put in not just the ERP, the SAP or whatever, but to put in a recommender system so that you can replenish more so-called accurately, more smartly, and more intelligently. So this is where the space is. Okay, so this one I want to share with you here, and that is that here, recall. In the first part of my slide, I talk about data being captured, distributed across multiple nodes in real time, right? And because of this now, business see opportunities. to develop innovations that will lead to competitive edge. What's a competitive edge? Even hospitals, okay, mind you, also want to look for that competitive edge. And competitive edge is to make sure the patients come in, draw more patients in, and then make them stay as short as possible, right? And then so that they can live and they pay and they can leave the system healthy, right? So if you look at this sentence that I said, that if you understand this in a commercial setting, essentially what I just said is hospitals are also becoming more like businesses, and they're increasing what we call their churn rate or their inventory turns, if you see patients as inventory. So what does it say? It says that supply chain managers in this context must be able to make business decisions, good business decisions, that is, okay, based on real-time data across the entire supply chain. What is entire supply chain in the context of hospital? It could be, I know you're a person, you got, say, a predisposition to diabetes, right? So when you go in the hospital, I will know what medicine to get it ready for you. I'll know how to treat you. I know where you should be staying and how long you should be staying, for example, right? So all this, if a supply chain manager can do that, then he'll be very effective because he's going to help the doctors, he's going to help the hospital administrators, the ops people in the hospital to manage the hospital supply chain before the patient comes in, when the patient is in hospital, and when the patient leaves the hospital, so that they can then determine when is a return visit of a patient or an inventory. So this is where we talk about, creating that digital supply chain or using that common data platform. Now, this part of the presentation actually is interesting because it's actually two projects into one, what I've done for you here. And that is that the earlier part was actually done about 3 years ago, where there was the first wave before pre-COVID, okay? Where hospitals, in this paper that we presented, hospitals are looking to improving operational efficiency and productivity to treat more patients. So they'll look at it as, we were brought in, okay? So we looked at it as a supply chain issue. And this is a brand new hospital, greenfield, all right? And so what we did was to set up a greenfield hospital, 6 towers, 7 floors, each block has got, 7 floors each floor, sorry. So 7 floors each block, and in total 1,800 beds. But of course, this is nothing. This 1,800 beds in Singapore is nothing compared to the largest hospital in Bangkok, which has got about 10,000 beds, right? But in the beds arrangement, okay, in this hospital is very interesting because 400 beds are for long-term care. So what does it say? Long-term care, that means patients must be fed, they must be, what their personal needs and all that must be constantly replenished. And then 1,004 will be for emergency and, convalescent care, and the rest will be the rest of the world, right? So they wanted to know how to look at this setting and say, how do we then create a system whereby it's smart enough to keep these patients happy and yet don't let them stay too long and yet meet their needs so that there's no wastage. So there are a lot of objectives, a lot of criteria put into place, right, to design the efficient logistics systems for both the CSSD, which is the Central Sterile Services, right, materials management, food, pharmacy, linen, and so on. So we did all those, right? And now, of course, is there a reason for using this? Brand new hospitals. So where do you get the data, for example? Remember, I talk about the world of big data. So where do you get the data? Okay. Before that, let me show you first this hospital. This is the architect's design of the hospital. Impressive, but of course, I'll tell you this. Whenever you see the architect, they create very nice drawings. But the nicer the drawing, the harder it is for logistics. Because when you look at the schematic down there, the ground is not even and everything. Then you find that, look, moving goods across is going to be challenging, tricky. And in every hospital, there will be 2 basements, right? Basement 1 is for the car park, for the stock warehouse, and basement 2 will be for the other facilities. But what's the cost of this joker? The cost of this joker is close to $1 billion, right? The number is there, $971 million. So they cannot afford to make mistakes. And because they invested so much cost, right, then you might want to say, okay, that's the cost. So how do we make sure that the operations become efficient and justify the cost, right? So that you can actually get more patients in, treat them properly, and then after allow them to leave faster. Okay, so the first part of the project of this one we look at the whole supply chain, right? Handle the 5 supply chains that I showed you in the abstract: food, linen, pharmacy, materials management, and the CSSD. And then after that, we even did the routing for them, but using simulation. Okay, but that's not the talk for today, right? The talk for today is to say, okay, this is the hospital we understood now. And then because it's brand new, the big issue is, where do you get data to do the simulation, you might ask? Where do you get data to set the parameters, you might ask, right? And how do we get data to integrate both man and machine? Man means nurses, porters, for example. Machine means the robotic solution, the AGVs, the AIVs means the automatic intelligent vehicles, and the robotic porter. Now, why robotic porter? I'll give you an example. not this hospital, but another hospital on the east of Singapore. They got a pyramid system in the hospital, right? And the people at the bottom of the pyramid are called the porters. These are the porters which are the lower end, but they're important because they need to deliver the case notes, sometimes deliver the ad hoc meal, sometimes walk a patient or wheel a patient from one place to another, from one ward to another. And these people are, one, getting old. Two, it's a thankless job. Nobody wants to be there. And as you get old, they tend to be a bit more careful, slower. So usually you will receive the brunt of the complaints about hospital quality and service. So the thinking was this, and that's how do we then halve the workforce for this hospital, that is, okay? Halve the workforce of their 900 or so porters to half by integrating human and machines. And the machines will be the robotic porters. But of course, you might ask, what in the world is a robotic porter? What does he do? How do we get him to do it, isn't it? And can a robotic porter be able to handle glass, for example, hand out a glass of water, or even a bottle of water to a patient or a hospital guest? Okay, so that's where the gripper technology comes in. Okay, so data first, right? Data can be incredible. Each of the floors in the hospital, you find it's not as simple as anything that we see. If you go to a clinic, you see some of the challenges in the clinic, then I'll tell you this. When you work in a hospital, you see even more challenges because there are so many different types of diseases, so many types of patients, and so many different types of equipment that sometimes it's a nightmare just to manage the inventory itself. So we have to collect data from other hospitals and then do an estimation. So that's where we build probability, we build distribution. So what does it say? It says that, look, when you work at technology, it's not just technology for the research, but if you work in technology, your foundation, your basis must be good. And in this case here, a clear understanding of the data, the behavior of data, building probability distributions about the data becomes very important. That's why your fundamentals must be there. And that's why I was telling you that last week I attended a meeting for the external assessment of the university. Right, this entity actually integrates their logistics program across other departments, in particular mathematics and computer science. Right, so that's where the value is. Okay, now let's go back to the crunch of this one in the interest of time. Let me take 5 minutes or so to finish off all this. The robotics that I promised to show you is here. Right, this is a robotic porter. Scary, isn't it? It's not what you see in the movies, you know, where you have these people shaped like a human almost and talk like a human, but this is the first generation that we're going to see on the ground. Right, a true real-life robotic porter that will do 3 things. Right, 1, they can read and see. They got machine vision. Second, they can think. They got intelligent mobile robotic arm, which is flexible enough to hold. And third, they're driven by algorithms. In short, they have a brain, they work with them, right, to predict, right, what the patient needs. It means if they give and the patient doesn't want some parts, they put it back, they will recognize it, and then after that, they'll update their algorithm. So next time, they will not deliver that part to the patient, right? So that's what this is. So these are the 3 essentials. So for us, it's very simple. Look at all the slides there. Okay, our role here was this. Okay, in terms of our deliverable for this project, was to actually come up with a predictive software that can predict the patient's consumable usage during their period of stay and plan the optimized top-up to be made by the robots. So that's exactly what I'm saying, right? When a patient comes in, okay, let me backtrack a bit. 2 steps. 1 is, if you've ever been to a hospital like what I have, I'm sure some of you would have at some point in time, maybe to visit, hopefully not to stay for long, right? But when you go to a hospital, have you ever wondered, right, what is the admission criteria? When are you going to be given a bed? Now, the rule in the hospital is very simple. The patient cannot be admitted if the bed is not ready. And the bed cannot be determined or deemed ready if the bed sheet is not on the bed. Very simple rules, you know, and that rule has never been changed since time immemorial. Why? Because it's a very simple check and balance thing, whereby then they see, okay, this is a bed ready. And if you look at the hospital, why is it that they always have very scheduled check-in times and scheduled check-out times? And sometimes the checkout times are delayed because the pharmacy is not ready, or the pharmacist is not ready, or doctor cannot sign off, or maybe because you need certain things to take home. For example, some of the consumables or some of the dressings that you need to take home, right? And if it's not ready, then you can't check out. So what does it say? It says that, look, at the end of the day, we need to predict some of these things, right? What the patients need to use. And more importantly is, if I tell you, right, or if I ask you a question, do you know for sure from your research, how long does a patient stay in a hospital on average? It means an inpatient, right? And most times we don't know, but we do know one thing. Hospitals do not like a patient to stay in the bed in a hospital for too long, because then they become a liability and it becomes bad for the image of the doctors. It becomes bad for the hospital, right? What they want to do is to shorten the time. So the question is, what is the actual time? Because once you know the what we call the length of stay or the LOS, then you know how to plan how much to replenish, isn't it? So it's like a supply chain feeding. It's a line feed system, not just like in automotives. We talk about the line feeding just now, right? So here also we have a line feed. So now the question is, how do we do it well? So that's where they brought us in to work with this 3PL. Now, when we went in, we also, very much like you, green, wet behind the ears, naive, and say, okay, we can try that. We thought it was a very simple manufacturing problem. We can do it. Then lo and behold, when we saw this, there are 51 consumable items. This is okay, to be fair, okay? You see this title here is very nice. Quick overview of the patient's profile. But the files are there. And you see 3, because they're all files drawn from different hospitals. We have to take different hospitals with different specialties, draw them together, build it into a master file to build for this hospital what it's going to have for the departments, the doctors, the wards, the treatments. And we say, okay, this is what we think they'll be having. For the same number of beds, roughly the same number of patients, and for the same disease or the same illness. Then we look at this and we say, wow, this is the nightmare. Okay, why? To get to this slide, 51 consumable items, right? It took us 3 months to clean the data. And you find that this is the biggest challenge. For example, I give you an example here, okay? Simple things like diapers, right? You know, there's nothing to do with pink and blue, okay? Nothing to do with gender-based diapers. But the size of the diaper, large, medium, right? And then after that, location of the diaper is needed, specialist clinic, outpatient clinic, or in the ward. And then things like, for example, just now I talk about dressing and so on, right? There can be so many types of dressing, medium, small, and even, you know, specific dressing. The large ones we stick on, for example, the jello net and so on, right? So some of these things we have to pull out. And then after that, we say, okay, there are so many things here. So if a patient comes in, if I want to be nice, I'll throw every one of these 51 items into a box, and we call it a magic box. So that is like a feeding circuit, you know. When you opens up his bag, he can take what he wants and he can just patch himself, and then this is done. Or the nurse can patch the patient up, and that's done. Then we say, not everything should go into one box, because then it's too expensive. Now, why is it too expensive? The rule is very simple. Whenever the items are issued to a patient, when the patient does not use it, he can take it home himself. It's all accounted for, discarded after that. So to draw it down, we have to take 51 and say, okay, what goes into a box? Only this, right? And that's done in consultation with the nursing team, right? So simple things like toothbrush, you know, simple things like bibs. Why bibs? Because if you're in bed, if you need to assisted feeding, then you need a bib. Then wipes. Wipes are the most difficult to account for. Okay, from there, then we look at some of these things, and we need to collect information. Things like length of stay that you see over there, right? Then we build up all this and say, okay, at the end of the day, we only need so much, right? Even height and weight of the patient, right? And then before you even do the prescriptive, the analytics, you need to do what we call in data, exploratory data analysis. So for those of you who are doing research, if you're playing with data, please, I suggest that you take a good foundation in doing EDA or, okay, the word is not explanatory, but exploratory data analysis, okay? So now, data cleansing, I told you already. So we took 3 files from one of the hospitals, and then we took all this data. And we know in some data, there's also text, not just numerical data. So how do we convert this? And this part we have not done yet. Data verification we've done. Then the other part is missing data. Doctors, you know, now I can understand. After doing this research, I can understand why people say doctors, they write like file scratching, because they're hard pressed for time. They simply scribble something, and then you're supposed to make sense of what they have scribbled. So that's where you go back to research and say that in research, if you've done basic statistics, they will say, okay, there's this thing called a fine number summary, which is what I shown you in the picture in the same slide. Minimum, lower quartile, median, upper quartile, and maximum. With this 5, you can describe a distribution fairly well. Okay. But
Prof, you got a few more minutes, please.
2 more minutes, is it?
Yeah, if you can wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, I'll wrap up. Yep, thanks. So in here, we have to do others, and that's where we talk about skewness and kurtosis, which is something that you would have learned in your stats classes, right? Third moment and fourth moment. Then how do we do this? And just wait, we took the research, what we've learned, and this is coming from two people in the US, Cornish and Fisher in 1938, where they built all this distribution, right? And they say using 5 numbers, and from there we can build, okay, the skewness and the thickness, that means the outlier of the distribution. Okay, so once we do all that, we build, then we say, okay, this is what it is. We straight down. Patient admission data, clinical observation, then consumables. And finally, we had out of 30,000 unique admissions, right, we only could have 9,171 usable data, right? So that's how much it is filtering. So when you talk about big data, the reality is this. Yes, we need data to be big so that we can make some sense of the remaining data. Big enough to make sense, okay? That's what it means. Second is, now, then we build all this, then we say, okay, now we have the consumables with the features. We say, okay, now from there, I can then determine what's the size of that magic box. What's the size of the Felix the Cat bag, so to speak, how big it should be, so that we can then decide what's the size of the robot to have. But before that, look at the EDA. So that's why I asked the question, what's the average length of stay, right? Or the length of stay of a patient? 6 days, that's the answer. The LOS was about 6 days. And the bad news is this, as we get older, you tend to stay longer in the hospital. So the median age for patients is about 71 years, and the skewness is there, right? So it's skewed towards that. And we also did some of this exploratory data analysis and showed that, look, most people go to hospital because of old age and acute medicine and general medicine. That very few will go for neurosurgery. And the next one is most things that you put in the Felix the Cat box, most patients, about 70% of the patients use only less than 4 consumables per admission. Right? The rest are all just either wasted or thrown away. So how do we manage it better? And the most item that is used is what we call the diapers. Surprise, surprise, isn't it? Now, okay, wait, sorry, I was a bit too fast. Sorry, I go back a bit. So then we did machine learning. We took all the EDA we've done already, then we applied the machine learning inside there, and then we evaluate. So that's where we are at this stage now. And for machine learning, what did we do? And if you've done machine learning or AI, then you know that there are a lot of machine learning algos today, about 10, but most times in most of the literature, we use about 8 of them, right? And then we build into all this, and so then we see that, and there are certain measures like accuracy, recall, and machine learning. But because the data here was imbalanced, right? It means people who, there are more people staying in the hospital than people that turn away from the hospital. So we have to then use other measures, for example, the F1 score, right? But if you take down the F1 score and predict it at the warehouse level, then you find that the parts are not always consistent. They do not have the same F1 score. What is an F1 score? Well, that one I leave it to your professors to teach you and to highlight to you what is an F1 score, right? But what we want is a consistently good F1 score across all the items in the magic box. Okay, so how do we do it? This is what it is. AI-driven prediction system using Python. Right now, we've done about 1,200 primary diagnoses. There's still more to go, right? Another 2/3 left to go. And so it's something for them, the hospital, to change, right? So if you're looking at technology, looking at data, I think it's good practice to actually learn Python early in the game. Okay, so that's where this is. And then now we are doing the systems integration at the same time with the robotics vendor that you saw the pictures just now. All right. Then, of course, with research, the more important part is publication at the end of it. Like what Professor Prem mentioned, that, hey, when you do your PhD, when you do your research, you also must think about what to publish, where to publish, right? So this is where we are supposed to do. So the first one we send out for review. The second one is still under preparation. So with that, let me now pause and take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Mike. That was a very very deep presentations and a lot of research work. I hope most of you PhD students have got that. I'll go straight to the questions that is in the chat box first. There are 2 questions that are in there. If there is anything else, you just let us know. So one is from Dr. Lal. He says that, could you show the application of deep learning with non-supervised neural network application with lesser human intervention in supply chain management?
Yes, it is possible. There's some research. Let me answer that question first very quickly. Thanks for asking that question first. I guess you are probably someone who does research in that. Yes, there's some work that's done, deep learning. Not for the hospital. There's another piece of work that we have embarked on with some of my collaborators overseas, where we talk about other platforms, Kickstarter, for example. right, and citizen science. And that's where we do a bit of deep learning and unsupervised. And of course, here we have to do the usual validation test, Mr. Tenfold validation, to understand and how to assess the accuracy of the results, right? But that one, I think we can leave it offline if you want a deeper discussion.
Okay, thank you. And question number 2 is from Barry O. I'll read it to you in the interest of time. What do you think are the reasons why logistic companies are not racing to use the technologies such as faster processing, paperless processing real time?
Okay, paperless has been around. As you, I mean, the reader asked a very good point. Paperless was mooted for air cargo, air freight, right? About 15 years ago, IATA and so on. Actually, we developed a e-freight system for them, a paperless system, and after that, it was rolled out in Thailand. Okay, the reason why they're not doing that to a big extent is very simple. No one wants to give up control of the border. Okay, no one wants to give up control of the border. That's the first thing. The second thing is no one wants to pay for the cost of investment. So if you are a medium-sized 3PL, then you find that either you pay to make your customers happy, or you have to find customers who are willing to pay. But for the larger 3PLs like DHL, I know they've been doing a lot of work in this space, blockchain and all that. In fact, DHL has a whole innovation lab in Bonn in Germany, where they actually look at these things and how to move forward to the next generation.
Okay, Barry, you want to say something else? Short one, maybe?
Yes, yeah. So I obviously, Prof. Go, very interesting, fascinating presentation, a lot. And this is blockchain related to the data, the big data bit that you talk about, where blockchain can be used obviously in has got all the functions of immutable.
Yes, correct.
And so
all the hyper ledgers and all that, yeah.
So and I know that big companies like IBM has come up with their blockchain technology platform for logistics companies.
Correct. They worked with MERS about 5 years ago, but that one was a test bed, so not very successful, especially IBM. I think it was in IBM Transport, because a friend of mine used to work with IBM Transport, so they were involved in that research. But today, I think the big player, leading player in this is not IBM, but it's SAP.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering why the entire logistics industry is not moving at a faster pace to adopt this, because since the platform is ready, and it's actually subscription basis some more, what's the inertia problem here?
The inertia is very simple, mindset, right? The question is, why change when your name broke? Right? If they can work properly and customers are not really asking for more, why give them more when they're not, when they're not paying for that incremental more, isn't it? Right? So that's the reason behind it. But if you ask the next question and say, look, will change come? Then the short answer is yes, it will come. Right? Because all you need is just one person to adopt and one customer say, hey, how come you're not doing it? My previous provider was doing it. Then straight away, they all will change.
Is it because it's too transparent?
I'm sorry. Sorry. Out of time. So I just have one more question before I let this go to Prof. Prem. From Dr. Janaka, what business move already. What business-related research fields are ML commonly used in NUS?
Well, that's a very hard question to answer, because machine learning is applicable when there's rich data. Rich data is quite different from big data. Rich data, that means to say that, look, it's not, I showed you about the data cleansing. It took us about, together with my researcher, 2 to 3 months, right? So that means the data was a lot, but it's not rich. From 30 over 1,000, we only managed to get 99,000 over usable data points, okay? So that's what it is. So any organization that has got rich data, I think it is possible. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we talk about ML. It's not just about ML. You ask yourself, is ML used for data science or used for analytics? They're slightly different. Data science is where you use it specific to improve an organization, whereas analytics, you use it and can extend it to other organizations. Okay, that's what we have come to a conclusion. But if you ask me, what have we done to this using machine learning? I mean, what have we done to this world using machine learning? That I'll say. In the last 24 months, we have worked on a number of projects. One is that you saw the hospital, right? Machine learning. Second one is the library, where you can use machine learning to select books from websites like Amazon, Goodreads, Wattpad. Yeah, Wattpad. That to select books to make them be able to buy books faster to recognize what the market needs, right? Because the last thing a library wants is to buy something that there's no readership, for example. And you know, libraries have a policy. You cannot be holding books forever in your library because why? It takes up space. And the reality of the matter is this. Okay, in fact, that's a good point. The other day I had a meeting with my client who is actually the library, right? I forgot to ask that question. The question is, how long does a book stay in the library? Right? Given that, you know, that, I mean, how often is the book borrowed? That's the question I wanted to ask, yeah. And then the third part about the library is this, that you can use machine learning to weed out the books. Now today's practice, weeding out a book is done at the branch level, the branch library level, and weeding out is usually done by inspection. That means you eyeball, you see the book, the pages are torn, frayed or whatever, and say, okay, time for the book to go, and order a new one in. But you can't be having throw one book out and order a new one in, because why? When you throw a book out, it's not thrown into the bin. You must throw into a overflow warehouse, right, to hold it before you dispose of it. And then to buy a new book in or to bring a new book in, you need money to bring it in, the budget. Where do you get the budget? And the house rule for them is very simple. So long as the book does not exceed $100, you can bring it in. But if it's more, you're going to justify that. We all know the reality. And today you buy a hardback, there's no way you can get a book for $100 US. Or less. You need to be more than that. Okay, so that's the second part. Then the third one is citizen science research. And the fourth one, of course, is Kickstarter. So these are all where there's data available, free data available. I think machine learning from a research perspective can be done.
Okay, thank you. And I'll pass over to Prof. Prem now to do the closing for this session, and then after that, pass over to Harvey.
Okay, enjoy, guys. Enjoy your colloquium.
Hi, Prof. Mark. Thank you. Yeah. On behalf of everyone here today, we thank you for you taking the time to speak with us this morning. Yeah, your insights into the world of big data and the recommender system and how it is impacting our lives with the full illustration of the Greenfield Hospital was both fascinating and also further probing our PhD candidates to explore into the field of supply chain and the systems integration. That was really interesting. Yeah. And I particularly liked hearing about some of the new initiatives that have been put in place in Singapore on the supply chain, and also learning about those 5 key trends that we can put into our research and also our business practices. The innovation business, shorter, tougher business cycle, expanding and demanding consumer base, converging wages and increasing costs, yeah, and finally the evolution of big data, yeah. Finally, Prof. Mark, I would like to take this opportunity also to thank you for supporting and providing recommendation for Must University to be awarded the EQUIS full membership. It wasn't easy. I know there was a lot of ding-dong emails going up and down, but you were still there supporting us, and we got the letter and acceptance into EQUIS as a full member. That was really, really good. Prof. Mark, we thank you. And once again, on behalf of the entire Malaysia University of Science and Technology staff, faculty members, deans, students, and also the other participants here, the industry players here with us, we thank you for taking your time to be with us here. Thank you, Prof. Mark Gao.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay, thank you, Prem. See you again in good times. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Don't everyone go yet. We have, yeah. Thank you. Professor Dr. Harvinder is going to say something to the rest of you. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Dr. Harvinder.
Thank you very much. That's really kind of you. Enough time. May I share my screen, please? Okay, screen. A little slow because of the heavy traffic in our portal. Okay, I think now it's there. And here we go. This morning, actually, I'm here to share with you some good news from our School of Business. Let me just close this. And wow, the one which I want is not coming. I'm burning good time here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, let me just get there already.
Jago, you can take my time, Jago.
Thank you, Govind. Thank you. Okay, so here it goes. Actually, Prof. Prem has already set the scene this morning. He was talking about the gold standard in education, and Prof. Go's kind participation in helping us to achieve it. Basically, what I'm here to do this morning is to share some good news from School of Business today. Tomorrow, I will be sharing some good news from the International Supply Chain Education Academy. So I'm trying to get this to be full screen, but somehow otherwise,
F5.
yeah.
Sometimes
F5.
Just go ahead.
Function F5, is it, Govind?
Just F5, yeah.
Okay. All right. There were some special effects in my screens, but I guess we need 5G already. Yeah, another reason why we need 5G. What I am here to share with you today is you already know that we have got our collaboration at the master's level in the School of Business with the Chartered Management Institute. We also already have got accreditations for getting 5 stars in employability and teaching and learning. And as Prof. Prem shared this morning, we have got the #1 standing for international students. And we've been working very hard to try to get those necessary accreditations that will make your PhD degree very much more worthwhile. Now, the reason why I have been bold enough to share this message with you this morning is because, you know, in America and even India, it is quite common for people to have triple MA, double MBA and things like that. So I know you are PhD candidates or people who are already involved in high-level research, but I'm here to share with you an amazing piece of news, and that is that Malaysia University of Science and Technology, because of all these accreditations that we have now been able to strike a collaboration of dual certification with the Triple Crown University. And Triple Crown means that it is fully accredited by AACSB, which is the American Standard of Education, by ACQUIS, which is the European Standard of Education, and AMBA, which is the Association of MBA Schools around the world. The university that we are working with, the business school that we are working with, is ranked number 41 in the world by Financial Times. And well, that school is called the Kedge Business School of Bordeaux in France. And this will become available to you sometime in September or October this year. I would like to invite you to look at information that we will be sharing with you in coming days and coming weeks, because right now we have a blended Euro-Asian MBA, which is designed by this Triple Crown University together with us at MUST, and it will be made available to us at our doorstep. Yeah. Not only that, we have talked to the university, and I think this is because Prof. Prem already has got a very good working relationship with them. He has been a visiting professor for them for many years. So in view of his special position in this whole arrangement, we have been able to bring this world-class MBA at a very, very good, affordable price. Yeah, I mean, MBAs of this nature are above 100,000 easily. But we can assure you that it will be a very, very reasonable price, really great value. Firstly, because it's a Triple Crown University, and it's a Triple Crown MBA where they focus on 8 key pillars of the business and break it into 21 learning units. Now, anyone who goes through that kind of training is going to really get the career opportunities very high up the ladder. Yes. So please consider this for your colleagues, for your friends, for your family, and we will be getting back to you more on this. I will be sharing my slide deck probably with Bhavani, the IPS school, yeah, because my computer seems to have given up on me. Thank you, Dr. Khairi. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. You exceeded only by 15 seconds, so that's fine. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this session. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, the same time, where we have Encik Azman Hassan as the second speaker with a very interesting topic of moving the box in a thunderstorm. Okay, and also some of the questions that has not been answered in the chat box, he said he will attempt to answer them as well. Okay, so look forward to seeing the same people here or more tomorrow at the same time. Okay, we for students, we can log out. After you log out from here, please join in the student session for the colloquium, the link, and we'll see you there. All right, we'll start at 11 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
Thank you.